Yeah, you see, it goes back as far as 1930 when it was Dominion Forest Service. And then it changed to the Alberta Forest Service in 1932.
Does that mean it was run federally as
Yeah.
the Dominion Forest? Where would that be headquartered?
In Grand Prairie, there was one person only here in Grand Prairie area, whole area. His name was Dan Minchin. And he was the federal forest ranger for this entire district. Grand Prairie to Bolsberger, the whole thing. And then it changed to Alberta Forest Service.
And your dad was specifically in the South Wapiti here, or what was his beat? How far towards Kakwa Falls or Kakwa Lake or whatever? How far would it go up there?
South to Grand Cache, but
How far?
and west to Range 7, which did not include Two Lakes or Kakwa Falls. That was in the 24 East Wembley district.
I see. Whose beat was that?
That was our chairman's originally.
Oh.
That was the first.
Of Sherman Meadows?
Yeah. That was his original beat. And then there was, after him, there's a guy by the name of Bert Coast. There was several in there. A guy by the name of Scott only lasted 1 year. And myself, I only lasted a couple of years. The pay was extremely poor. And when the sawmills came in there, they paid an awful lot more, so
We've been talking about your dad, but as you just mentioned, you yourself ended up inheriting the family business for a while in terms of becoming a ranger. How did that come about?
Well, in 1949, I put in an application after talking to my dad and the new timber inspector. His name was Ted Hammer. And the boss of the area was called the timber inspector in those days. And they told me that I should apply, that I liked the idea, and that I would apply for the Wembley district. I went to work out in the bush, and in March I got a telegram that one of the lumber haulers brought out to me that I was to go to work. So I started in April of 1949. But
Doing what?
forest ranger.
Same job as your dad on
Yeah.
a horse? So
Same thing. Yeah.
What kind of first, let's start with your dad. Was there any lumbering other than just people for their own use back in your dad's time? And when did that first start, that commercial logging would start, and where?
Commercial logging started here with Hales H. Ross and Company, moved into Big Mountain Timberberg, which is about 30 miles south of here on Highway 40. And they started, and it spread out that they hired as many as 14 mills would saw in that timber root during the winter. For years it went on that way.
14 mills?
Yeah.
So what mill, were there any of those in this corridor down here?
Well, this soon opened up. But really not until, directly south of Grovedale didn't open up until the early 1950s, when Imperial Lumber Company opened up in the Ball Mountain Timberberg.
Imperial, I guess, had the mill below what's called, where Sinclair had his camp there, below Saddle Mountain, or that, where is that exactly? That's on, that's not the Torrens, is it? That the
On
Torrens?
Torrens.
Right on the Torrens at the base of that Saddle Mountain.
Yeah. That was,
and there was a mill back there. I looked at that place and thought, like, what a place for a sawmill. You'd have to haul.
Yeah.
What year was that in there?
that was, that's in 58 or so.
And there was a road obviously back there.
Yeah.
And was that why the road was put in? Or?
Yeah, it was. And a fellow by the name of Zelensky took a mill in there, sawed 4 Imperial Lumber Company. One season, and then it was dropped because it was too expensive. A terrific lumber haul, especially on the road they had in there then.
But I cruised timber back there once, and I noticed that what they were cutting was trees bigger than this kitchen table.
Fabulous timber up there. Yeah. Now that's Weyerhaeuser block, of course.
And there isn't that kind of size back there, it seems now, but
No,
what was the bush like then compared to what we see coming in on the trucks now, or, you know, their sticks compared to what some of those little stumps look like, I guess.
well, nowadays you see any load of lumber come in, they're all just sticks, you know, really, because everything is creamed in those early years. Grand Prairie Lumber Company and Hales H. Ross and Canfor out here, they creamed the whole country. Before the clear cutting came in, mills would go in there and they'd leave anything that looked not quite good enough left standing. Of course, the wind would blow it down later anyway. Most of them.
What was the ranger's job back there once? How did the ranger's job change once the timber operations began?
Well, then the rangers had to inspect these mills. They never released the timber breaths, but they would cruise the timber, mark it out, and usually a ranger would get a crew in to do this. And this was on in later years. And they would cruise the timber, but it was the ranger's job then to inspect that timber, make sure the stumps were cut low enough, to make sure the lumber was sawn right, make sure the slabs weren't too heavy, all these kind of things.
So it was the government forest ranger that would actually cruise the berths and point out what was to go and what was to...
Yeah, exactly. The ranger was pretty well always along on the cruise and mostly in charge of it. But at times they would send a crew in. But it was the ranger's responsibility to look after it.
And the skidding operation obviously then would have been all by teams, I guess, huh?
Boys are going to use the truck to go and pick Curry's stuff up. Go. Here, go.
Yeah, we're going now. So, asking the question again, because the machinery's fouled up
Yeah.
here. What was the job exactly on the ground for the forest ranger once the timber operation started?
Well, their job was to make sure that the timber was used properly, there wasn't too much waste. They had to check the size, lumber size, slab size, stump height, all that, lopping on each and all of these mills, all during the winter. Well, they usually had a monthly checkup on each mill. So a lot of the times the ranger himself didn't even have their own vehicle because they used horses or... So they would catch a lumber truck and go out there and check all these mills. Many times they did that. And I did that myself. That was their main job during the winter.
When you look at a site like the Imperial site on the Torrens that we were talking about earlier, just below Saddle Mountain, when we say a lumber mill today, that involves, you know, a few millions of dollars of equipment and so on. Did you ever see that mill down there near St. Clair's old camp? What did it look like? What would it consist of?
Well, it was just a plain ordinary basic carriage, edger, small set of trim saws, and a very short green chain. That was it. It was a very basic sawmill.
Was it covered?
They had an old wind edge roof on it, just to keep the snow off.
And how many men would be down there?
I think totally, logging and all, there was 21. There was when I was in there.
So guys would go into the bush with, what were they logging with? What were they cutting the trees with?
There was power saws.
Big power saws?
Yeah. There was no such thing as feller bunches or anything like that in those days. And they skipped them with small cats, D4s. So they didn't even use big equipment for that. Because you didn't have to make roads for small cats. That was one of the reasons. Sneak in amongst the trees.
elsewhere?
So they, as far as equipment was concerned, for these small mills, there's a couple of small cats, and they usually farm that out, contracted it out. A couple of guys in and some callers, and away they go.
And that would have been a winter operation too back there?
Yeah, always a winter operation. Back there was the same.
They must have had a cat on the road from here to Sherman Meadows the whole winter out there.
Pretty well. Had to keep it plowed. And of course the road then wasn't anywhere near like what it's like now.
And I think you said earlier that road was built for that, to get the road in there was built that far for that operation? What was the road prior to that into the Two Lakes, Kakwa area, prior to that mill?
They had a lookout tower at Copton Mountain, which was east of Two Lakes. And they had another one at Pinto Mountain. So that road serviced those two towers.
And when you say road?
Trail. You very seldom ever get out there with a two-wheel drive truck.
Had to pick your weather?
You bet.
Did you ever get stuck back there longer than you wanted to stay?
Oh yeah. We got stuck in Fiddle Creek one time. There a day and a half. One day and a whole night. So lots of that went on.
How'd you get out?
Well, we eventually corduroyed our way out. Chopped and piled enough stuff in there, we drove out of it. But that was a common thing. And in those days, there wasn't much in the way of decent vehicles, the winches or hardly anything like that. So it wasn't that easy.
And you wouldn't be running into too many people along the way. Was there any favorite stops you had of the people that lived down there that you did visit?
Well, that ended as far as after you left South Wapiti. And the last place on that road was Jim Rand's place. So pretty well everyone stopped there.
That'd be Mick Ryan's dad?
Yeah. And coming into this country, pretty well everybody stopped at my mother and dad's place. That was the stopping spot.
Oh, no problem. We're getting just about to the end of side B. Well, we've actually just been doing a survey from what's the year you said your dad came in? Was in the early 30s.
Yeah.
And you worked actually for the forestry.
In 49.
This is kind of like the front step of that whole Nose Creek, Two Lakes, Kakwa. This is the entrance to it. Always has been, I guess. How long have you lived in Grovedale here?
We moved out here in 1938.
1938.
Yeah.
That was your dad? He moved out here?
Well, he came out here. He was ranger in this district from 1933 on, but moved the family out here in 1938. And there was 11 families in Grovedale and what they call Bridge Creek, which is down here 4 miles. They used to divide it up. There was only 11 families here then. And there was no road connected South Wapiti to this. That was separate. A separate ferry.
Across the ferry at Pipestone.
Yeah.
So you got to Ryan's and that whole line to Two Lakes from Wembley.
Yep.
Across the Wapiti at the ferry.
Right.
And here they had a bridge or
Ferry.
ferry here
Had a
too,
ferry
at
here
the
too.
Wapiti
Yeah.
crossings of today, the Wapiti Bridge.
Yeah.
And did he, when your dad first came out here, was he living, did the forestry provide the place for him to live, or did he homestead here, or?
No, they had the homestead. The homestead at 4 miles down southeast here, just squatted on a quarter of land. There was very little land surveyed here then. And then 1946, they bought this half section here. Well, leased it.
If there was very little land surveyed here in those years, when did the first real surveys and boundary markers go in the higher country down there, Two Lakes, Kakwa?
They were cutting boundaries and The boundary crews were in there in 1936. So some of the boundary markers, one at Medallion Lakes is marked 1936. Whether they were in there before that, I don't know. Not sure. But that would be about the earliest time they were out there.
I had heard that Pete Campbell, who you must have known, outfitted some of the first boundaries, but earlier,
Yep.
I think even before the first war or something.
Yeah. And saw the name of was it Rio Grande? Lived at Rio Grande. He used to outfit boundary workers in there too.
Did you know Pete? He used to. I thought of him when you said Captain Bradley, because in his real young years, almost as a kid, I think he used to work for Captain Bradley over here.
Yeah. Cap Bradley, the Campbells used to live here, just at south end of Grovedale here.
Campbell Creek.
Yeah, for many, many years, the whole track. But Pete worked for Cap Bradley, and as did a lot of other natives from here. At one time or another, worked with Cap Bradley. Yeah.
There's a book.
Yeah.
Captain Bradley.
All right. Because, well, he married, I don't know whether he married her or not, a native woman from Dimsdale. And that was, as you say, that was quite a deal there. Yeah.
But I didn't describe it.
No,
You go ahead. You've seen more of it over the. It was quite. It had greenhouses and everything. Just describe what that spread on the smoking here looked like.
well, when I first saw it was early 40s, and he had a great big house there, 2-story house, a full-length veranda on the front, a field about 8 acres out in front of the house, about a quarter mile from the river, on a real pretty flat. And he had outbuildings there, and he had a bunch of cattle. And that was his main purpose out there. He took the cattle out there and he milked them all, and then he would put the cream on board a boat and bring it down to Goodwin Crossing and bring it into Grand Prairie. But that didn't ever pay off too well. The river would go way down and lose all the cream and so forth. But
wasn't he a remittance man? The whole point of being out there was to be out far enough to. It really wasn't a commercial operation so much as a.
no. See, he was a remittance man. One of the people that was kicked out of the high families in England.
Right.
But
Which meant, how did that work, being a remittance man exactly?
well, they didn't want him in Britain anymore. They ruined the name of the family. They were usually pretty heavy boozers or something, and so they'd send them over here and then send them money every month or a couple months or whatever. So they paid their way over here. Well, they had to, in order to get this money coming in all the time, they had to show that they were doing something. See? So he had his famous dairy ranch in operation that smoked. So what that turned out to be, as they knew it in England, would be a whole lot different than what was going on here. Because the whole operation was centered around the almighty bottle. And that's what went on most of the time. Either out there or in Dimsdale or wherever. Yeah. It was quite an operation, but a beautiful place. It was a fabulous place. And to come out into an open like that, out in the wilderness, and to see that big house.
Looked like the old Ponderosa ranch
Yeah.
house off Bonanza.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly like that. And it had a greenhouse off the west side, I
Yeah.
remember. A big glass greenhouse.
Yeah. And they brought
When would he have first gone in there?
probably in the 28, 27, 28.
So he would have been one of the few In those years, one of the few white operations on this side of the Wapiti River, and certainly the only one stretching
Yeah.
into this whole south.
Yeah. Yeah, there was no, very little in. At that time, it was Jack Thompson's ranch, which was 4 or 5 miles east of here, which is pretty well all taken over by brush now. It's all, used to be 1,700 acres of natural meadow. So he ran a pile of cattle there. And there was another little operation this side of Cap Bradley's. Billy Salmon used to run cattle there. And he had people that would live in a cabin down there to watch his cattle in the river. That's this side of Cap Bradley is about 15 miles on the Smoky, which presently